Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. This is our Teammates of the Past segment. I'm Harper LeBel along with Vincent Turner. Logan Landers is our producer. And Vincent, I always like talking about others and especially their influence on me while I was fortunate enough to get to play with them during my 11-year NFL career. And we're going to start my rookie year. Well, the first year I actually made it. I was drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs, and I was cut, released, let go, but I finally made it. My first year in the league was with the Seattle Seahawks. It was the last year of Steve Largent. So I didn't get to see the 99 other receptions that he touchdown receptions he made, but I got to see his 100th. And he ended his career leading with receptions, leading with yardage, leading with the number of touchdowns. He was a league leader. Now, all those have been passed, but he was so good at what he did and worked so hard to be the very best. Permanent impression on me. Vincent, I can talk about Steve all day long. What are some of the things that you ended up learning about that young man from Tulsa, Oklahoma, that made an impression on you?
Well, when you think about Steve Logic, you think about the school he came out of, Tulsa University, not known for being a football powerhouse, and some of the great players that came out of that school, Jerry Rome, Don Blackman, Sylvanian Collins right now that's with Arizona, Tyler Smith that's with the Dallas Cowboys. But we don't think of great football players coming out of Tulsa. Then him going to the Houston Oilers, being a fourth-round pick in the NFL draft, and Houston not wanting him. That's what sticks out in my mind the most. And then just him continuously going to a franchise that was an expansion franchise. And let's get real here. Seattle wasn't winning a lot of games when he first got there. But his ability to be really being elected All-Pro, to Pro Bowls, to some of the greatest receivers in the game, from Harold Carmichael, to Lynn Swann, John Stallworth, Tony Hill, Mark Clayton, Mark Duper, Art Monk, Chris Collinsworth, James Lofton, Irvin Fryer, Jerry Rice, Mark Duper, Al Toon. To be in that kind of company, that's elite, that's special. And the one thing that I'm going to take away from Mr. Largent, that he played in the AFC West against the Raiders in his battles against Mike Haynes and Lester Hayes, Hanford Dixon and Frank Minifield from Cleveland. And he put his work in on them. I'm sorry. He had some games against him. Him going up against that level of competition, and then him being part of that competition, being voted to numerous Pro Bowls, being voted All-Pro numerous times. That's what I gained respect for Mr. Largent. His ability to play that receiver position, not a guy that had a lot of speed, but a guy that played the position as a perfectionist. I think about his perfect route running. I think about his determination, his concentration, his work ethic, and then his hands as a receiver. I didn't see him drop a lot of balls. And I'm going to say this one more time. He was with Seattle at the beginning when they weren't winning football games. And still, he was still being mentioned in the companies of the Mike Quicks of the world, the Gary Carters of the world, the Anthony Carters of the world, the Stanley Morgans of the world. That's special. And him going up again, let me put some more names out there. Ronnie Lott, Mark Hayes from Denver. Them some special football people. Darryl Green from Washington. He's still putting in the numbers and the work. That's why I got respect for him as one of the top 10 players in the league. If you think where he's coming from and how he played the game. See, that game in the 80s and 90s was at another level. To me, that's the greatest era of pro football, the era that you played in, Harper, because you had so many super football players that played that game at a high level. And it wasn't a lot of workout, I want to say, off-season programs in place. To play at that level and be on the field, I'm going to say it once again, that's a class of elite. I wanted to be a pro player, but it wasn't in my cards. Back to you, Harper.
You know, you mentioned the off-season aspect of it. I got picked up after training camp had already started. There was an injury that the Seahawks had back in 1989, and they brought me in I ended up signing with the club about 2 weeks into it. The regular season hadn't started, but back in those days, some teams had 5 preseason games. Some only played 4, but there were 4 that were normally scheduled for every team. I'm watching Steve run a corner route and then a go route, and then the coach says, "Hey, back on the ball, do it again." Runs another go route, full speed. He comes back, not even breathing hard. And so when he takes a break, he runs another short little play. We run, and then he comes off. And I walked over and I go, "Steve, you're like you're in better shape than an Olympic marathon. Man, you should be running a marathon for Kenya." He goes, "Well, I work out during the off season. I run 40s one time a week to get myself ready to go." And I not only heard that, but I listened to what he was saying. And from then on out, every off season, I would at least, once a month, every other week, I'd have other stuff that I needed to be ready for. But even now in my older age, I will test myself every now and then. I'll run 40s. And I'm telling you, when you get to number 23, you're thinking I'm done. What is Steve Largent doing? But he was different. He had a different mentality. Remember, he was a second team All-American coming out of Tulsa. So he was a good player. And he gets drafted by Houston. And I don't know what exactly happened. I think they were kind of thick at the wide receiver position. He was a little small. I'm not sure if he got along. 75, was Pastorini still there at that time? He may not have gotten along with the quarterback, but he stopped getting coached, and things didn't go right, and he ended up getting cut. And thank goodness Seattle picks him up. What a find you would get here, a kid off the street, even though he's still a 4th rounder. He's on the street, and they pick him up, and look what happened. Hard worker, diligent, thinking man. He would do double moves and try to get you to believe he was going up the field when he was going to make a break, and to make you think he was going to make a break when he would go up the field. And he and Jim Zorn especially, and then Dave Craig, were such an amazing connection on deep corner routes and posts and all these plays where Steve ended up being a hero in Seattle, and everybody loved him. He was one of the first guys. He's little, he's likable, he smiled, he was articulate. So he's a guy that if you interviewed him after the game, he'll tell you what's going on, but the fans loved him and he was theirs. You'll still see a number 80 jerseys being worn by a number of fans that go to Seattle games. In the old jersey, they got a different color now of blue. It's a much darker blue, and they've got a different logo right now, and the helmet's a little bit different. But that helmet design that he has right there with the 2 bars across. Remember, Steve lost some of his front teeth. You mentioned Mike Harden getting just clobbered on a little post route over the middle. I wasn't on the team when that happened, but Steve ended up getting drilled. Broke a couple of his teeth. I think it broke his nose as well. Concussion, the whole 9 yards, because he was wearing that helmet. A couple of weeks later, he's healed up. Same year, and the Seahawks played Denver in Seattle. And Mike Harden gets an interception against Dave Craig and ends up getting clobbered. Steve takes Mike Harden off his feet and he lands horizontal. He fumbles the ball, and Steve ends up recovering the fumble. And even Steve himself will say, that kind of felt good, to get him back for what happened. So there was no vengeance involved, but you know what? You got me, I got you. That's the type of guy, very, very tough, competitive person. Vincent, those are just a few of the things that stick out in my mind about Steve when I first met him.
Like I say, what I really respect about him and loved about him is the competition he went up against. And like I said, I remember the battles he had against Mike Haynes and Lester Hayes. And I'm going to tell you something. As a receiver, he put the work in on him. I remember some games he went up against Hanford Dixon and Frank Minifield, put the work in on him. Ronnie Lott had problems with him early on. He was a guy that, like I said, remember, Seattle didn't win a lot of football games when he was there early on, but he was the mainstay of their offense. And it's proven by him being elected to the numerous Pro Bowls and All Pros. Like I say, look at the confidence and respect he had to have to be elected first team with people like Carmichael, Swan, Starworth. I hate to say their names again, but I'm going to say it. Wes Chandler, John Jefferson, Chris Collinsworth, Roy Green, Mike Quick, Mark Clayton, Henry Ellert, Carlos Carson from Kansas City, Stanley Morgan, Tony Hill from Dallas. This guy was on the team with them, first team All-Pro, first team Pro Bowler. And back then, the game was very serious with players that we still talk about today. Some of the greatest, LT, Lawrence Taylor, Reggie White, LC Greenwood. It's serious, man. Harvey Martin. I remember one time they played against the Dallas Cowboys. Oh, my God. He put their work in on Everson Walls. I'm sorry. If anybody's watching this video, he put their work in on Everson Walls, man. Back to you, Harper.
Well, one of the things that I learned about Steve very early on in my time with Seattle is he was a very meticulous note taker. And there were some times when Chuck Knox or Brian Becker, our offensive coordinator, were leading a meeting, and maybe he wasn't writing down exactly what Chuck said, because Chuck would say some things every now and then, but he was always thinking. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He was reading that book. He'd read it on the plane. He'd read it, in between meetings. He ended up obviously being the number 1 receiver in NFL history when he retired. So he broke a lot of people's records. But the way that he did that, you mentioned the hard work. It wasn't on a great team either. Seattle went to the playoffs only a couple of times, and he got to play in one AFC championship. That was against the Raiders when they were in Los Angeles. So it was hard work, but he was a leader, and then he ends up with a gold jacket. He ends up going into politics. He had a great career as a House of Representatives, a congressman from Oklahoma. And I got to meet him in Washington when I was playing with Baltimore. I called him up one day and asked him if I could take him out to lunch. And he said, I'm kind of busy right now, but tell you what, meet me on Tuesday at 1:30, and we'll get a chance to visit. And he had about 30 minutes on his calendar. It really was about 20. His secretary made sure that we didn't stay long, my wife and my 2 kids at the time. But we ended up having more than an hour with him. He took a call that I had to leave the room because some other senator wanted to visit with him about some vote that was going to be taking place. But what a wonderful human being, and a great representative too, a guy that would really represent you no matter who you were. He was out for the people. There's a picture that I have. I'm going to hope that this shows up right without the blink. This is him in the at the Hall of Fame induction, and I lost it. Hold on, there we go. Hall of Fame induction in Canton, Ohio. Eugene Robinson, where's Eugene? That's he's in the foreground with the checkered shirt, and there's Steve right behind him. I got to say hi to Steve during Morton Anderson's induction in Canton, and hadn't seen him in years. But Pro Bowl, All-Pro, leading the league in every different receiving category, having his number retired, being a member of the NFL Hall of Fame. I mean, what more can you say about a guy in what he accomplished, man? He had great hands, great feet, great moves. If you just watched him, just watch, and you'll go, man, I could run routes a little bit better. I could run them like what Steve Largent does, and I know I'd get open. So I tip my hat to him. Obviously, a tremendous human being, a man of faith, and a guy that you really would say I could lead my life like his. What a great example he had, what he did, not only on the field, but off, second to none. So thank you for letting me get a chance to share a few things about Steve. Final thoughts from you, Vincent?
When we talk about football players, when we talk about people in general, I always use the word elite, respected, honor, character. That's when I think about Steve Largent playing the wide receiver position in the National Football League. Played a lot against a lot of good football players, great players that we still talk about today. Dennis Smith, the Broncos. Let me throw his name in there. Albert Lewis with the Chiefs. This gentleman right here played against them and performed. And one thing about life, to me in general, you could talk about what you've done, how you done it, but when it's out there in black and white, that's what they call facts. For you to see, for the whole world to see. Steve Largent was a hell of a football player at the wide receiver position in the National Football League. Back to you, Harper.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I'm sure Steve, it took a little while, but he ended up earning every bit of it. So I thank you for those comments. Our purpose here, folks, is to highlight some players and some people that we hope that you have as much of an interest as we have. You know, when we go online and we look at people and talk about them, we'll read some facts and figures. Why don't you do the same? Go look up Steve Largent for yourself. Go do yourself a favor and learn some history and talk about some of the guys that made a difference in the game. That's what we're doing, and we're just sharing our stories with you. So we appreciate you being a part of that. I want to say thank you to Logan Landers to put those pictures together as he did, and obviously for Vincent, who has really made it a mission for him to highlight and to discuss and to pinpoint certain players that had an impact on the game. We love doing it, and we hope you love it equally as much. So for 100 Yards of Football, this is the Teammates Edition with Harper LeBel. We want to thank you for tuning in today and being a part of the show. Thank you so much for doing so. Have a great day, everybody. And again, for Teammates of the Past, this is Harper LeBel saying goodbye.